Welcome back to Next Shift with Rick Wagan. Suzuki does not suck. This is the post-game show after the first playoff game where the Montreal Canadiens lose 3-2 in overtime on an Alex Ovechkin goal. The Canadiens fell behind early, took a lot of beatings in the first 5 to 10 minutes. Looked like the players were out of sorts for sure, weren't ready for the physicality and the speed that came with playoff hockey. It was a young Montreal Canadian team for the first 5 to 10 minutes. They weathered the storm enough to only be down 1-0. And then in the second period, the Canadiens came out and played a much better period. They did fall behind and give up another goal and to make it 2-0 going into the third period. The Canadiens definitely took it to the Washington Capitals in the third period and went on to score a goal by Cole Caulfield on a power play, picked it up in front of the net and found the empty net. And then a second goal with 4 minutes and 15 seconds left in the third period by our boy who does not suck, Nick Suzuki, on a rebound where off of a Carrier shot. He had poise, time, waited in front of the net, took a step 4 feet over and finished it to make it 2-2. The Canadiens did give up an overtime goal 2 minutes in. Alex Ovechkin was left alone in front and finished it off, and the game ended up 3-2. I will say the Montreal Canadiens got the butt end of the refereeing, and I know it sounds like a biased fan, but there was a cross-check to the face of Gallagher. There was roughed up Hudson behind the net getting punched in the face, and Gouli barely touching him, being called the third man in, and they got a goal scored against them there. There was an obvious interference play on Demidov. 10 seconds after he got rid of the puck, he was upended by Ryan Leonard. And even on the goal in overtime, it was a pass by Gouli that tried to get Line A, and Line A was interfered with, and the puck went all the way down for the icing, and that led to the face-off that led to the final goal. So it was a rough outing for the Montreal Canadiens when it came to refereeing, but all in all, I will say that the Canadiens were outplayed in the first 5 or 10 minutes, definitely out physicaled, and I think the Canadiens have to look at two things. One is, do they bring in Arbor Xhekaj to be that nuclear deterrent that we've been talking about? I think they should. Do they switch up the second line, who was definitely not playing very well? Our boy Ivan Demidov was fairly quiet, other than a goal post on one shot, barely touched the puck. Newhook was fighting it. Line A just hasn't been the player we need in the 5-on-5. So all in all, I thought the Montreal Canadiens had a rough start, but after the first period and even after the first 10 minutes of the first period, they held their own. The Canadiens need to find a way to split the series and win the second game. I'm optimistic. I think the Montreal Canadiens showed a lot today. You have to remember, this is a very young team. Players like Hudson, players like Demidov, players like Heineman and Struble and Gouli, they're all playing their first playoff hockey, including Montembeault. And so there's a lot of players out there just learning this level, this speed, this intensity, this physicality, and what you can get away with. And I think the Canadiens, once they kind of figured it out after the first period, they outplayed the Washington Capitals on Washington Capitals home ice. A big game Wednesday night. The Montreal Canadiens face the same team. I think they'll probably bring in Xhekaj. If they don't, we'll see if he comes in the third game. Obviously, the Canadiens had a great second and third period from their top line. I thought Juraj Slafkovsky was slow in the first period as well. Another young player trying to figure it out. I think by the second and third period, especially the third period, he had some really nice shifts. I thought he was important on the third goal. And even on the second goal, he made a very subtle play where he kind of upended the other guy's stick when Cole Caulfield was alone in the slot to finish the goal to make it 2-1. So all in all, I was very happy with the Montreal Canadiens outing. Unfortunate they didn't win this game. It's definitely a challenge to fall behind 1-0 to a team that if you win that game, you maybe make them a little bit more nervous. And so from that perspective, I was hoping to see a different outcome. But all in all, you can't fault a young team for not being prepared for the first 5-10 minutes. They've never experienced it. And this was a team that had a game plan, and their game plan was to take out their young defensemen and players like Hudson and players like Gouli, who's a big player, were taking some big shots, including Caulfield on a huge hit from Ovechkin. Suzuki was manhandled in the first period as well. Again, it was a tough first game, but that being said, I like the way they turned it around in the second period, and I love the way they came back in the third period. So this is a great sign for the Montreal Canadiens. Obviously, they have a long way to go to win this series. They have to win a game first, and I think the Montreal Canadiens are in it to win it. They're comeback kids. They're playing a solid type of hockey. It's an incredible amount of experience these guys are getting, and we're really looking forward to the remaining games in this series. Hopefully they can take it to another series. Really, it's invaluable experience. This is gravy. This is house money. This is a season that was not expected to be in the playoffs. These young players are getting a ton of great experiences. I call that players like Hudson, players like Demidov are going to step it up in game 2. They're going to realize what they've experienced, and they're going to be able to be more prepared in game 2. Obviously, the first line can play like they did in the second and third. The Canadiens are in really good position, and they just need to find some secondary scoring and some secondary offense from the third and fourth lines and all three of the other lines that are out there. Again, the only negative I'll call, I had a hard time watching Matheson out there. I thought he was just not good. I mean, obviously, he didn't make any huge mistakes that led to goals, so kudos from that perspective. But all in all, I thought he just made some terrible decisions, some dumb mistakes, and it was a frustrating game. He got walked around early. He backed up when the guy was behind him in his own end. He missed the puck on the blue line, which I guess is an execution error, but he just looked uneasy, which I guess, all these players are uneasy in the playoffs. I'm looking forward to game 2. I'm more optimistic about the Montreal Canadiens than I would have been if they didn't come back, obviously, and if they didn't play the way they did after the first 10 minutes. But I think the Canadiens weathered that storm. They figured it out. I think they realized that, it was coming fast, and it was coming hard, and it was coming with a lot of physicality. But all in all, I think the Montreal Canadiens are better prepared for game 2 after playing that type of period in the first period. And I think they'll be able to weather that storm early on and be able to take it to the Washington Capitals. Obviously, every goal is huge in the playoffs. Hopefully, the Canadiens will get not the raw end of the deal when it comes to reffing. I know that sounds like a whining fan, but I just thought that overall, I didn't see any bad calls against the Washington Capitals, but I saw a couple of terrible calls. I guess there was one where Anderson tripped Carlson on the point that you could have called when it was a power play, but that was during the goalie power play. That was a terrible third man in, rough, whatever they called that. He barely grabbed the guy, and it was just a terrible decision by the refs, in my opinion, in a playoff game like that. I mean, Gallagher got cross-checked in the face in a scrum, and there was no penalty, but they called that goalie penalty. Again, I'm on a tangent when it comes to refereeing. I don't think the Canadiens lost only because of the refereeing. I think obviously they didn't come out flying in the first 10 minutes. They definitely got manhandled and out physical by the opponents. They definitely turned that around in the second part of the game, especially in the second part of the second and third period. So all in all, I'm excited to watch the next game. I'm predicting a Montreal Canadian victory. I really believe the Canadiens are going to split the first 2 games. I think they've shown and proven to themselves that they can play in this type of hockey game. They were 1 goal away in overtime, and definitely players like Lane Hudson and players like Demidov and some of these players like Slafkovsky need to take it up from the first shift. And obviously Hudson lost his man in overtime, lost his man in the earlier part of the game as well, Beauvillier. So he has to step it up defensively, but I'm not worried about that kid. He's going to figure it out. And so all in all, Canadiens are in the playoffs. They're not in the mix anymore. They're in the playoffs. They've lost game 1, 3-2. Back to the drawing board on Wednesday. Looking forward to the game. Suzuki does not suck. This is Next Shift with Rick Wagan. Talk to you guys soon.